So how can we use LLAMA 2 without writing a single line of code? This is a question I got asked by non-technical people like product owners and project managers. So I sat down to figure out what are the different options available currently. The 4 options currently available are the official LLAMA 2 demo app, Perplexity AI's demo app, Hugging Face model demo, and lastly, a stable diffusion site that seems to be running a private version of the Hugging Face space. If you're someone who can't write a single line of code and would like to use LLAMA 2 for your work, all for free, this video is for you. First comes the official LLAMA 2 site. One of the first things you will notice is that you won't be able to access this official site without signing up and logging in. You can either register with your email address and password or simply use the GitHub account. I've registered with my GitHub account. Once we are logged in, the first thing you will notice is that this site gives you full control over the parameters of the model. You can not only choose which model you wish to use, but also set the temperature and top P parameters, which control the randomness of the response. You can also set the max sequence length range from 64 to 4096, which is the highest for LLAMA 2. Let's set the context to be a comedian and ask the model to write a stand-up comedy script. It clearly separates the response into jokes 1, 2, 3 and comes up with the script. Let's ask for one more script to see how different it is to that of the first one. It definitely comes up with a script that is different from the first. For example, in the first script, joke 1 was about self-care, but in the second one, it's about dieting. And in the first one, the joke 2 was about social media, but in the second one, it's about fitness. Similarly, joke 3 was about relationships, but here it's about technology. At this stage, let's change some of the parameters to see what the impact of these parameters are. Let's start with pushing the temperature all the way to 5. The response is a bit, well, quite surprising, as we are not even seeing something that is human readable with this value of the temperature. If we take it down slightly to around 4, it doesn't seem to like me changing the parameters abruptly in the middle, so I had to log out and log back in, set the temperature to around 4, and let's see how it goes. This time, there are some readable words, but there are still quite a few unreadable tokens in the middle, and it's making quite a few typos in the response. So with the temperature reduced to 3, unfortunately, I still couldn't get it to work. So I had to turn it all the way down to 2, and this time it becomes more interactive and asks me for more direction as to what sort of comedy I like. When I said light and playful, it took into account what I said and started generating text in that genre of comedy. When the temperature is about 1, it starts generating responses that are quite realistic without any typos, and even with words like clears throats, pauses for laughs. Let's move on to the top P probability score. So the default value is 0.9. I'm going to decrease it all the way to 0.1. So in case of ChatGPT, adjusting top P is equivalent to adjusting the temperature. In fact, OpenAI advises to fix one and adjust the other. But in case of LLAMA 2, somehow top P doesn't seem to have an impact on the randomness of the tokens. And we are getting the same response irrespective of the p-values. Is it just me, or are you guys facing the same problem as well? Please let us know. Now moving on, let's start playing with the max length parameter, which controls the length of the tokens generated. Let's start with setting the max length to somewhere around 250 and see what it does. So the response doesn't change much. It still starts with, "Hey folks," does an intro, and then lists a couple of jokes and stops abruptly in the middle of the second joke. Now, I was more of expecting a complete script that meets the max length criteria. If we now reduce the max length completely down to say 64 tokens, then it abruptly stops with a show. Like I said before, I had to clear history, log out, and log back in to play around with the token length of 64. After doing all that, the generated tokens don't change at all and abruptly stop at 64 tokens, similar to the previous example. When I ask it to write one more script, it responds with a show and then stops running, indicating that it's done. Let's switch to the 13 billion parameter model to see how it goes. With this one, to my surprise, there are many more smileys. And when I asked for one more script, it came up with a similar script with minor modifications in the words, but still with many more smileys. And after switching to 7 billion parameter model to see how it goes about the same instruction, obviously it's not going as good as the 70 billion one, but it definitely does the job. Upon asking it to give one more example, I only got the same response that I first got. So to wrap things up and summarize, the three size models definitely behave differently, even for such a small task of generating a standard comedy script. To me, it feels like they have been trained with different datasets, or it's quite possible smaller models are not hallucinating enough to come up with creative outputs. One more thing I noted is that even if we click on stop explicitly to stop the execution, the bot keeps running. I'm not sure if it's something to do with the browser, though it's highly unlikely. And this is unlike the ChatGPT interface, where you can happily open several conversations on different topics and enjoy each and every conversation separately. The other thing I noted is that the default model is the 70 billion parameter model. By simply defaulting to 7 billion parameter model and giving a message to the user saying, "Do you wish to switch to a 70 billion parameter model for better results?" we can burn less GPU hours and turn much more environment friendly. So if you want to use LLAMA 2 for serious use cases, you should definitely consider the 70 billion parameter model rather than the 13 billion parameter or the 7 billion ones. If you're someone who can't be bothered about all the input parameters, then Perplexity AI has released a free version of LLAMA 2 demo app. So if we go to labs.perplexity.ai, we will be able to interact straight away with LLAMA 2. There is the option to choose one of the three models, 7 billion or 13 billion or 70 billion, but the UI does not provide any way to control the randomness of the response, as it does not expose the temperature or top P parameter. Now the second caveat is that there's no separate way to set the context or the system message. So I'm going to try the same example as before, but I'm going to directly input everything as the instruction and see how it goes. Let's try the 13 billion parameter model first, as that was the one that distinctively gave a lot of smiley outputs with the LLAMA 2 demo app. So clearly, we are not getting any smileys here. I'm not sure if Perplexity has fine-tuned the model on their own dataset. Now, if we switch to the 7 billion parameter model, the response is quite good in comparison to the LLAMA2 demo app. Let's ask it to write one more script and see how it compares. It looks like we are getting a different response this time. For example, in the first script, we found words like, have you ever tried to order food at a restaurant and realized you have no idea what you want? Now we are not seeing any of that in the second script. So I have a feeling that Perplexity Labs has definitely fine-tuned the LLAMA model on their dataset. So as a general comment, I'm quite impressed with Perplexity's work here, and we can also note that the response from this model is really fast at about 75 tokens per second. Now that's quite impressive compared to the LLAMA2 demo app. The other good thing is that they don't have to create any login to access the site. You can straight away start using the demo. Now the third way you can access the LLAMA2 model is through the Hugging Face interface. There are separate interfaces for all three models, 7 billion, 13 billion, and 70 billion. Now let's start with the 70 billion model. So this model did not list the jokes one after the other like the LLAMA2 demo app. Let's ask it to write one more script and see how it does. This time, it comes up with a conversation which we did not find in any of the other models. Moving on to the 7 billion model, let's ask the same question. Surprisingly, it refused to generate a comedy script saying, I'm programmed to provide respectful and inclusive responses that are free from any form of discrimination or hate speech. Following which, I asked it to generate the script within its safety bounds, for which we got a nice response. Now the last model from Hugging Face is the 13 billion one, which again refused to write a script which is considered offensive or inappropriate. Now instead, it provided a list of tips to come up with the comedy script, which is quite interesting. Now, when I responded, asking it to provide a script rather than mere instructions, it did provide a response which resembles that of the original LLAMA2 with a lot of smileys. Well, instead of displaying smileys, it displays words like sigh, laugh, and smile in brackets. I'm not surprised because Hugging Face is providing a space to run models without modifying them. So if we want to customize and run our own models, then we need to duplicate the space, which leads us to the stable diffusion, which is a derived space of the Hugging Space running at a site stable-diffusion.fr/lambda2. I have provided the link for Stable Diffusion demo in the description of this video. Now, only the 70 billion parameter model is available here. Now, the links to 7 billion and 13 billion redirect us to the Hugging Face site. If we ask this model the same prompt to generate a stand-up comedy script, it pretty much comes up with similar response as that of the Hugging Face model, and there are no surprises here. So, to sum it all up, if you want a really fast model without bothering you or without bothering about any of the parameters, then Perplexity AI is the answer. But if you want full control on the length and randomness of the response, then the official LLAMA2 demo app is the way to go. So that's pretty much what I found out when I did my research on running LLAMA2 without doing any coding whatsoever and without shelling out even a penny to use the model. I hope that's useful, and I will see you in my next. Until then,